Stranger Things gives many fans nostalgic feelings based on the timeline it was based on, which is the 1980s. The show has been very believable and iconic, from the cast to the set and costumes. But have you ever wondered what the cast would look like if the show was actually filmed and produced in the 1980s? Well, we have it all figured out as you explore why these actors would have been the ideal cast of Stranger Things. In the Stranger Things franchise, casting the Hawkins gang accurately was very important, but it's most critical for Eleven, the soul of the show and the one whom the strange events followed into Hawkins. So, if Eleven had been cast in the 80s, Drew Barrymore would have been a perfect choice for the role, and here's why. Like the other successful child actors who carried the Stranger Things show, Drew was also an iconic actress in the 80s. She even played a role similar to Eleven, where Millie Bobby Brown got some of her inspiration. Drew featured in E.T. the Extraterrestrial as Gertie in 1982, and every lover of the film was impressed with her performance as her character showed the perfect blend of wonder, fear, and emotional depth which would have been ideal for Eleven if Stranger Things was produced in the 80s. Drew's role as Gertie is similar to Eleven's as it combines the supernatural with childlike innocence, which she nailed perfectly well. Also, Drew was between 6 and 7 years old when E.T. was shot and released, and it would have been perfect as she was very young and an ideal cast to portray the role in Stranger Things. Getting to portray such raw emotions at such a young age with expressive eyes and instinctive abilities is what Drew could easily play out and is precisely one of the things that makes Eleven stand out, which is a child getting through immense trauma and life changes without overacting. It gets better when you realize how close Drew would have been to playing Eleven in the 80s, as she also portrayed a young girl with telekinetic and pyrokinetic powers in Firestarter 1984. In this Stephen King adaptation, Drew proved that she could simultaneously be vulnerable and challenging. No other two words best describe Eleven like this. Drew was 11 before Eleven became a thing. She played the role of a young girl hunted by the government, hiding dangerous powers she could hardly control. The casting of Stranger Things was made in the 80s becomes super interesting, as Sean Astin would have been a spot-on choice for Mike Wheeler majorly because, as a child actor, he was the heart of 80s adventure stories. He had played related roles to the Stranger Things character, Mike, in the 80s, especially in his performance as Mikey Walsh in The Goonies in 1985, a film that could stand as one of the ancestors of Stranger Things. Sean's character, Mikey, is a kind of leader to a disorganized group of suburban boys who stumble into a dangerous type of supernatural-style adventure, which sounds similar to what Mike and the other Hawkins kids do. Mikey is similar to Mike in many ways, as he is idealistic, intensely loyal to his friends, a little nerdy and brave when it counts. In his role as Mikey, Sean brought optimism and a determined kind of vulnerability to that role, similar to the qualities that define Mike in Stranger Things. In their little group, Mike showed a leadership trait where he leads more with his heart than strength. Although not the loudest, toughest, or funniest among the kids, he's emotionally committed and courageous in his little way, similar to the kind of leadership Sean portrayed in The Goonies. His character, Mikey, served as the emotional compass of the group, and it would have been perfect to have Sean as Mike if Stranger Things had been made in the 80s. Also, Sean's role in Stranger Things 2, where he played Bob Newby, felt like a nod to his legacy of acting in stories filled with wonder, mystery, and danger. Interestingly, it makes sense that Will Weaten as Will Byers in an 80s version of Stranger Things would have been accurate because Weaten was already a sci-fi poster child. Weaten rose to fame in the late 80s, playing Wesley Crusher in Star Trek: The Next Generation, and he was so good at captivating everyone with his character. He was a brilliant and often isolated teen who quietly carried emotional and intellectual weight, which sounds too close to Noah Schnapp's role as Will Byers. Just like Will Byers, Wheaton's character, Wesley was a quiet observer with whom the audience sympathized, but also greatly misunderstood and most often felt entirely out of the group. Weaton showed how he could play this boy who's caught between vulnerability and being accepted, which are the most critical features of Will Byers, which means Weaten would have been perfect for the role if Stranger Things had been made in the 80s. But Star Trek wasn't the only place where Weaten proved he could be the perfect Will in the 80s. He was also featured in Stand By Me, where he played Gordy LaChance, a very sensitive boy dealing with losing his brother. The role was very delicate, requiring intense emotional depth, subtle grief, and a quiet soul, precisely the emotional space Will Byers lives in throughout Stranger Things. Things. Weaten's performance in Stand By Me has a strangely accurate parallel to Will, as it's regarded as one of the most haunting and mature portrayals of teenage loss in the 80s. Will is a child lost in a world that doesn't understand what he's carrying inside, and Weaten would have nailed the role the best if the show had been made in the 80s. Another cast member who would have made it to Stranger Things in the 80s is Malcolm Jamal Warner, who would have acted as Lucas Sinclair due to his cool-headed confidence. Malcolm Jamal featured as Theo on The Cosby Show, and he was calm, witty, and often the voice of reason on the show, similar to Lucas in Stranger Things. Theo was also the one who would challenge others when they got out of line, and amongst the Hawkins kids, Lucas usually controlled the chaos around him without losing charm or energy. In his portrayal of Theo, Malcolm Jamal also showed how smart and sensitive he could be, which would have made him a perfect fit for Lucas if the show had been made in the 80s. For Dustin Henderson, Jason Preston would have been a suitable cast for the role for many exciting reasons. Jason featured in Explorers as Darren Woods, a tech lover who brought a weird but enjoyable energy to the production, just like Dustin does for Stranger Things. One unique thing about Jason in any role is that he might not be the leader of a group, but he gets moments where he completely steals the scene as audiences remember him for his charm, strange ideas, and awkwardness, which describes Dustin as a whole. Jason's looks and mannerisms in the 80s are also much like Dustin's. He had this goofy cute look and could pull off the iconic blend of innocent nerdiness and genius-level humor. So Jason would have thrived as Dustin in a world where Stranger Things was made in the 80s. Stacy Keenan as Max Mayfield is also interesting because of her strict and outsider personality. In My Two Dads, Stacy played a character with strong opinions, emotional layers, and a don't mess with me vibe, which is Max to the core. As Max, Stacy would have carried the character by perfectly pulling off her authoritarian skateboarder personality while letting vulnerability peek through, especially in the moments involving Billy or her growing bond with Eleven. Also, Stacy's expressive face and sharp delivery style fit Max's aesthetics in the 1980s suburban setting. Although Winona Ryder plays Joyce in Stranger Things, she would have fit into another role better if the show was made in the 80s, Robin. Winona has played some iconic roles that inform this casting choice, as her performances in Heathers and Beetlejuice show how the younger Winona thrived playing funny and intelligent misfits in society. Robin is a queer character, and in the 80s, Winona often played girls who didn't fit into the mold, and her entire vibe would have made Robin's awkward, vulnerable queerness feel authentic and very appropriate for the era. There's also a sure way to Robin's monologues in Stranger Things, which requires wit and pacing, and Winona in the 80s had that fast-talking, comedic delivery, making her an ideal cast for if the show was done in the 80s, despite being also suitable for another character now in present times. Matt Dillon is a perfect cast to play Steve Harrington in a world where Stranger Things was filmed in the 80s. In productions like The Outsiders to Rumble Fish, Matt represented the cool, misunderstood bad boy, which was how Steve's arc began in the show. Matt also shares remarkable similarities to Steve with his depth, which means, on the surface, he could have this self-important and arrogant manner about him, but with the ability to show growth. And it's precisely how Steve transitions from being a jerky boyfriend to a beloved babysitter. For Nancy Wheeler, no other 80s actress would have nailed the role better than Jennifer Grey, who performed in similar roles. In Dirty Dancing, Jennifer went from being a sheltered girl to someone who took charge of her story, and Nancy went on the same path from seasons 1 to 4. Jennifer knew exactly how to play good girl roles that still held strength and steel, and playing out Nancy's investigative drive would have felt real in her hands. Nancy is a character going through constant tension between love, truth, and personal growth, especially in scenes with Jonathan, and Jennifer could embody all that without leaving anything behind. Eric Stoltz would have also played Jonathan Byers well, without a doubt. It's even crazier that Eric made his name by playing quiet, artistic, melancholic characters, and that's all that Jonathan is about. Eric shows emotions without trying too hard, as he could make a single stare or breath feel loaded, and that's literally what Jonathan does, where he doesn't talk a lot, but you feel everything. If Stranger Things had been made in the 80s, Eric would have had fantastic chemistry with Jennifer as Nancy because he knows how to bring out the realness in characters like Nancy. And big on our cast list who would have been perfect in the real Stranger Things 80s is James Speder as Henry Creel and Vecna because of his icy, calculating villain energy. James excelled at portraying rich, cold sociopaths, which he made apparent in Pretty in Pink and Less Than Zero. And his performance is perfect for Vecna's manipulative and chilling presence. James can can also play both the young Henry and old Vecna, as he has a boyish vulnerability that could turn dark, making him believable as a troubled child and horrifying villain. In Stranger Things, Jamie Campbell Bower used his real voice for Vecna, which was super scary and chilling, and James Spader's authentic voice could have also single-handedly caused terror through Vecna, as he has a silky, chilly voice that would have elevated the darkness. Erica has been one of the most hilarious characters in the show, roasting her brother, his friends, and anyone who tries to stand in her way, and Keisha Knight Pulliam would have nailed this role if it had been done in the 80s. Like Erica, Keisha steals the scenes from older characters, and she can deliver Erica's savage clapbacks with charm. There's also warmth under Keisha's sarcasm, which would have made her nail Erica's tone. Erica is a little kid who thinks she's smarter than everyone else, which she usually is, and Keisha is that girl who commands the same screen presence and is self-assured and unbothered.